You're welcome to the Economy and Politics show. I'm Ottoabasi, Abasiekong. This edition will discuss optimizing the AfCFTA for sustainable growth in Africa. Joining me virtually is Dr. Yemi Kale. He's the Group Chief Economist, Afreximbank, and Managing Director, Research and International Cooperation, Afreximbank. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our conversation will be focused on the Africa Trade and Economic Outlook, titled A Resilient Africa, Delivering Growth in a Turbulent World, which was launched at the recent Afro-Caribbean Trade Summit in the Bahamas, part of the Africa 2024 Africa Trade Report. So let us begin, Doctor, with the point raised by your report that global challenges undermine the performance of Africa's trade, which contracted by 6.3% in 2023. What were those challenges highlighted?
Well, I think we all understand that since the COVID-19 pandemic, the global economy, including the African environment, have been facing significant challenges. What we're having is the global economy trying to return back to some form of normalcy. But unfortunately, as the global economy, African economy started to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, I remember when the pandemic hit, borders were closed, supply chains were disrupted, output was affected across the globe, inflation rose significantly as a result, interest rates were increased significantly. So all these disruptions that were on their way to being corrected as the global economy started to recover were suddenly hit by the geopolitical tensions, starting with the various geopolitical tensions and climatic events, starting with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now we have the Israel-Palestinian conflict. We're also being hit by various climate events that are affecting different parts of the world, but affecting the African continent in particular, because they're more vulnerable, even though they are not responsible for the damage in the environment over the last hundreds of years, but they are more vulnerable. They're hit. So all this, the global economic recovery from the global the COVID-19 pandemic, the various geopolitical tensions, climate events has resulted in slowing down that global recovery. And unfortunately for Africa, since majority of their exports, which determines the export earnings, which also determines a large proportion of their growth based on the way the structure of their economies are designed, are based on, are largely geared towards extra African countries. So as soon as these countries were having challenges, as soon as they had a significant drop in demand in their countries for our own, mostly commodity raw material, then that hit us also, hit our economic growth, it hit our exchange rate, it hit our foreign reserves, it hit our financial inflows, and has contributed to slowing the economic growth within the continent.
Yeah, that's very insightful. But an interesting development is that intra-African trade expanded by 3.2%, an improvement in the same period under review. Does this mean that the objectives of the AfCFTA are beginning to take shape in the region?
I would say yes. There's a saying that never waste the opportunities of a good crisis. So I think as African countries, we are facing challenges trading with their traditional markets in Europe, their markets in the US, in China, because their economy was slowing down. African countries were forced to trade more within the continent. So in a way, that also helped to boost intra-African trade. It helped to push the objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which everybody has actually agreed is a huge, if implemented successfully and properly, could lead to significant growth, development, and stability in the African region.
Okay, Doctor. Now, the report also highlighted untapped potential in intra-African trade, especially in machinery, electricity, motor vehicles, and food products. How is Afreximbank supporting the region in unlocking these opportunities?
Well, Afreximbank is a developing financial institution. Our role is to support mostly production for exports, to support the export of African goods and services within the continent as well as outside the continent. And to do that, we've introduced several initiatives, depending on what we see as the challenge holding back intra-Africa trade. One is development finance, one is finance. During the COVID pandemic, and actually every time there's a global shock, you see that most of Africa's funding, whether it is in aid or in loans or aid or in direct foreign investment or indirect investment, always comes from, again, these same economies that tend to pull back their financial support, their financial investment in the country whenever there's a global crisis. What Afreximbank does is to provide funding, provide financial resources to many African countries that aid and promote intra-African trade. It could be providing infrastructure network that makes it easier for one country to make the other. It might be providing production support that enables expanded output by a country. So like I said, one is providing financial support to ensure expanded output and making trade within the continent increase. Another one is to there's something that there's a payment platform that's called PAPS that
Yes.
Afreximbank
Pan-African
introduced.
Payment Settlement System, PAPS, yes.
Yes. Is to just facilitate the way things currently are. If Nigeria wants to trade Ghana, Nigeria has to first look for dollars and then pay the person in Ghana in dollars, and then it's converted from dollars to cedis. Now, what the PAPS does is to avoid that dollar intermediary, that middle ground of dollar. It converts directly from naira to Ghanaian cedis. So that prevents the challenge of looking for dollars. Most of the time in the continent, the problem is not that you don't have the demand and supply. It's most of the time, it's lack of access to dollars to make those transactions. So that's what the PAP system does. It removes that constraint of looking for dollars, foreign currency, before you can trade within yourselves. Another thing is information. One of the things we found that is slowing down intra-African trade is lack of information within the continent. So I don't know, I might have a product, I don't even know that there are many other buyers within the continent that actually want my product. So that information gap, where African countries don't even know what they produce and who can supply what they need. And that's why I need 1,000 kilograms of wheat, but I don't know that a country within the continent actually has that. So I go to Europe or go to Asia to buy it, when I can actually just buy it simply across a few kilometers from my country. So providing a platform through it's called Mansa, providing a platform where producers of different goods and services within the continent actually you can go on that platform and find out who produces what you need and have verified suppliers of the goods you want. So again, information gaps was one of the major reasons slowing down the traffic trade. Again, we have provided that platform to ensure that we minimize information gaps. We also provide opportunities for businesses to meet, both in terms of so there's an international Afreximbank International Trade Fair. The objective is to bring producers of various goods and services together. Sales and investors, yeah. So so they know and they can meet, they can network, and they can connect, and they can create those links that are necessary to boost trade within the continent, investment. So these are just some of the few ways that the Afreximbank is trying to improve intra-African trade within the continent.
Yes. And then there are also concerns about downside risk from sovereign debt, sustainability risk, inflationary pressures, and even food insecurity. I mean, 2024 has been another version of global rising cost of living crisis. The crisis is still on. But mitigating this risk requires structural reforms. We've seen what's happened recently in Kenya and the pushbacks. But looking at the key economies like Nigeria, what should be the priority at this time to really put the economy on the path of sustainability?
Well, it's difficult to group all African countries to answer that question as an African, because different countries are at different stages, and they have different challenges. In Nigeria, I think, for example, Nigeria and countries going to similar problems, more about stability. I think the most important thing as far as Nigeria is concerned right now is just to keep things stable, and then you build on stability. Sorting that macroeconomic stability that Nigeria has been going through for the last few years would be probably the most important thing. I think in Nigeria, we've gotten to a point where it's difficult to say which challenge you should tackle first, because all the challenges that there are just so many right now, and they're all as important as each one's as important as the other. So I guess it's for government to plan a more systematic approach to dealing with one problem and move to the other. Understand the consequence of every policy you introduce before you employ ways of minimizing any of the negative impacts for any of those policies. So you understand fully well where you're going from start to finish, and understand the different headwinds in between the start and finish, and then come up with ways to resolve them. But like I said, the first step is just to keep things from deteriorating, just get things stable. Once you have a bit of stability, whether it's stability in terms of inflation, whether it's stability in terms of exchange rates, consistent growth path, growth doesn't have to be very strong growth for now, but consistent growth, gradual improving growth. Then you now start building on it. If you try to build when things are extremely unstable as they are, you create more confusion, you create more chaos. So I think for countries like Nigeria, it's stability. For others, it is stepping up investments. For others, in some parts of the countries, there's a bit of political disruptions and things. So it depends on the different countries. But I think one thing that cuts across every country is there's a need for stability before you can grow. Because there are 3 stages of growth. You have to first be stable, then you start to grow. And then from growth, yes, exactly.
So stability is very important as African countries continue to work around reforms. Now, how can the optimization of the AfCFTA reposition Africa for global competitiveness in trade and development? We've seen the work by the AfCFTA Secretariat, His Excellency Kale, and his team, Secretary General of the AfCFTA, are working around the clock to see that we can deepen inter-African trade. From the Afreximbank standpoint, how can this really boost trade and development in the region?
Like I said, it's if you are trading more with yourselves, then you're less likely to subjected to the different trade barriers that extra African countries might put in place. Most African countries are at similar levels of development. They have similar constraints. They have similar challenges. So it is, and in terms of competing among them, so it's a lot easier to compete among African countries than try to companies not to compete with European countries or American countries at this stage. So it makes it easier for them to compete if they are trading with themselves. It helps to structure competitive advantage, where you find situations where certain countries have an advantage over others in the continent in producing a particular good or service. The more you trade within the continent, is better at producing what? You have exchange of skills, talent that move across different countries. You are solving the key problems African countries need. You are producing goods and services African countries need. And you are reducing, more importantly, you are reducing your reliance on extra African countries, and making yourself a lot less vulnerable to various things that you can't control that occurs in their own environment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yemi Kale, for the time, Group Chief Economist, Afreximbank, and Managing Director of Research and International Cooperation. Thank you so much for these insightful conversations around your recent reports, Africa 24 Africa Trade Report and the Africa Economic Outlook. Hopefully, when we have this conversation again, we would have seen much improvement in inter-African trade, much development activities, and of course, Afreximbank doing its own bits to support Africa's trade development and growth. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you again for having me.
Yes, thank you. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this conversation, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow our social media platforms to engage further on this show. Till we come your way again, enrich yourself with the knowledge of socioeconomic developments around you, because it's a wise thing to do. Ottoabasi, Abasiekong, thank you for watching, and bye for now.